The gentle purr of the BMW's engine filled the quiet suburban streets as Alex drove home from his evening law class. Streetlights cast long shadows across the road, and the clock on his dashboard showed 9:45 p.m. He'd stayed late at the library, preparing for his upcoming finals. His mom had texted twice already, asking if he wanted her to save him some dinner. Alex adjusted his rearview mirror, noticing the flash of red and blue lights behind him. His heart sank. He knew this routine all too well. He'd been driving exactly at the speed limit, his taillight was working perfectly, and his registration was up to date. Still, he took a deep breath and did what his father had taught him since he was 16. Turn on the interior lights, keep your hands visible on the steering wheel, and stay calm. The police cruiser pulled up behind him, its headlights blazing. Alex could see Officer Thompson's silhouette in his mirror, adjusting his belt as he approached. Something about the officer's stance made Alex's stomach knot up. He'd seen that kind of body language before, and it never ended well. License and registration. Thompson barked before he even reached the window fully. His flashlight beam hit Alex's face directly, making him squint. The officer's tone was already hostile, as if Alex had somehow offended him just by existing. "Good evening, officer," Alex replied steadily, keeping his movements slow and deliberate as he reached for his documents. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" Thompson's response came with a sneer. "Suspicious behavior. This is a nice car for someone your age. Where'd you get it?" Alex felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. "It's my car, sir. I saved up for it working through college. Here are my license and registration." He held out the papers, watching as Thompson snatched them from his hand. The officer studied the documents with exaggerated scrutiny, shining his flashlight over every detail. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered suddenly. "Sir, I don't understand. I haven't done anything wrong." "I said step out of the vehicle." Thompson's voice rose sharply, his free hand moving to rest on his holster. "Don't make me tell you again." Alex's phone buzzed in the cup holder, probably his mom checking on him again. He thought about his father, the police commissioner, sitting in his office across town. The irony wasn't lost on him, but this wasn't the moment to reveal that connection. Right now, he was just another young black man being harassed by a cop who'd already decided he didn't belong in this neighborhood. Carefully, Alex opened his door, his movements measured and non-threatening. The night air was cool against his face as he stepped onto the pavement, his hands raised slightly at his sides. Other cars passed by slowly, their drivers rubbernecking at the scene. Alex stood straight, his law books visible through the car window, his tie still neatly knotted at his throat. He was dressed for success, as his mother always said, but to Officer Thompson, none of that mattered. "Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle," Thompson commanded, taking out his handcuffs. The metal clinked ominously in the quiet night air. Alex's mind raced. He knew his rights, knew this was wrong, but he also knew this moment could turn dangerous in a heartbeat. As he turned to face his car, he caught his reflection in the window, his father's strong features looking back at him. Soon, very soon, Officer Thompson would realize exactly who he decided to harass tonight. But for now, Alex would stay calm and controlled, just as he'd been taught. The handcuffs felt cold against his wrists, and Alex could hear Thompson calling for backup on his radio, making up some story about suspicious behavior and possible resistance. More lights would be arriving soon, more witnesses to this abuse of power. Alex closed his eyes briefly, thinking of all the others who'd faced similar treatment but didn't have a police commissioner father to call. This had to stop, and maybe, just maybe, this incident would help make that happen. Officer Thompson circled Alex's BMW like a shark, his flashlight beam dancing across the polished surface. Other officers began arriving at the scene, their cruisers' lights painting the peaceful suburban street in alternating red and blue. Curious neighbors peeked through their curtains, probably wondering what could be happening in their usually quiet neighborhood. "Pop the trunk," Thompson ordered, his voice carrying that same edge of contempt. When Alex tried to explain that his laptop and law books were the only things he'd find there, Thompson cut him off. "I said pop it. Now." From his position against the car, Alex could feel the cool metal pressing against his chest through his dress shirt. His tie, perfectly knotted for his presentation in class earlier, now felt like it was choking him. He explained where the trunk release was located, watching in his side mirror as Thompson roughly yanked open his briefcase. Well, what do we have here? Thompson pulled out Alex's constitutional law textbook, waving it around like he found something incriminating. Trying to play lawyer, are we? Think you know your rights? Alex remained silent, remembering his father's words. Sometimes silence is your strongest weapon. He could hear the other officers talking in low voices, their radios crackling with static and coded messages. None of them stepped in to question Thompson's behavior, even though Alex could see the discomfort on some of their faces. Nothing to say now? Thompson slammed the trunk shut, making Alex flinch involuntarily. That fancy car and expensive education don't make you special around here. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, some people holding up their phones, recording the incident. Alex closed his eyes briefly, thinking about how his mother would react when she saw this video circulating online. She'd been worried about exactly this scenario since he started driving. One of the other officers, a younger guy who looked fresh out of the academy, approached Thompson. "Sir, his license and registration check out clean. No priors, no warnings, nothing." Thompson waved him off. "Did you run the vehicle? Probably stolen. These types always think they can get away with." "The car's registered to him." The young officer interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "Everything's in order." The tension in the air thickened. Alex could hear more sirens in the distance, growing closer. His phone had been buzzing continuously in the car. His parents must be worried sick by now. The handcuffs bit into his wrists as Thompson grabbed his arm, spinning him around roughly. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Thompson's face was inches from Alex's now, his breath smelling of coffee and frustration. "Driving around here in your fancy car with your fancy books, acting like you belong." A police sergeant pulled up, his car's spotlight illuminating the scene like a theater stage. Alex recognized him. He'd been to their house for dinner last Christmas. The sergeant's eyes widened as he stepped out of his vehicle, recognition dawning on his face. "Thompson." The sergeant called out sharply. "What's going on here?" But before Thompson could answer, another car pulled up, this one unmarked, with government plates. Alex felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He knew that car. The crowd fell silent as heavy footsteps approached, and Officer Thompson was about to learn exactly whose son he'd decided to harass tonight. The air crackled with tension as Police Commissioner David Chen stepped into the light, his face a mask of controlled fury as he surveyed the scene before him. Thompson's face drained of color as realization slowly dawned, but it was too late. The damage was already done, and this night would change everything for everyone involved. The precinct buzzed with nervous energy as Officer Thompson marched Alex through the doors. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across everyone's faces, and the usual chatter died down as they passed. Every eye in the room followed them, some curious, others concerned, a few understanding exactly who Alex was. The booking officer looked up from his computer, his eyes widening slightly as he recognized Alex. He'd seen him at the annual police family picnic just last month. But Thompson didn't notice, too busy roughly guiding Alex toward the processing area. "Sit down," Thompson ordered, pushing Alex toward a metal chair. The handcuffs still bit into his wrists, leaving red marks on his skin. His expensive suit, pressed perfectly this morning by his mother, was now wrinkled and disheveled. "Officer," the booking officer spoke up, his voice careful, "maybe we should." "Process him," Thompson cut in. "Suspicious behavior, resisting arrest, and I want a drug test." He was typing furiously into his computer, probably trying to justify his actions before word got out about who he'd arrested. The night shift sergeant, Officer Kelly, approached slowly. She'd worked with Commissioner Chen for 15 years and had watched Alex grow up. Her face remained professional, but her eyes held a mix of concern and barely contained anger. "Thompson," she said quietly, "step away from the computer." "I'm in the middle of booking a suspect," Thompson replied without looking up. Guy was driving a car way too expensive for. The precinct doors burst open. Commissioner Chen strode in, still in his suit from the charity dinner he'd left early. The room fell dead silent. Even the phones seemed to stop ringing. Behind him came the department's head of internal affairs and two senior officers. Thompson finally looked up, his face going pale as he recognized his boss, and then even paler as he realized who Alex must be. The commissioner's footsteps echoed in the silent room as he approached, each step measured and controlled. "Remove those handcuffs," Commissioner Chen ordered, his voice deadly quiet. "Now." Thompson fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking slightly as he unlocked the cuffs. Alex rubbed his wrists, still maintaining his composure even as relief flooded through him. His father had taught him well: stay dignified, stay controlled, let your actions speak louder than words. The head of Internal Affairs stepped forward, her notebook already out. "Officer Thompson, we'll need your badge and gun. You're on administrative leave pending a full investigation." "But sir," Thompson protested, looking at the commissioner, "I didn't know he was your—" "That's exactly the problem," Commissioner Chen interrupted, his voice carrying across the silent room. "You didn't know he was my son, so you thought it was okay to harass an innocent young man. You thought it was acceptable to profile someone based on their appearance. Tell me, Officer Thompson, how many other sons and daughters have you treated this way when you thought nobody important was watching?" The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. Other officers shifted uncomfortably, perhaps thinking about times they'd stayed silent when they should have spoken up. The booking officer quietly closed the arrest file on his computer, erasing Thompson's half-written report. Alex stood up, straightening his tie. Despite everything, he felt a strange sense of purpose. This incident would change things, not just for him, but for everyone who'd ever been wrongly profiled. His father caught his eye, and they shared a look of understanding. Sometimes change needed a catalyst, and tonight's injustice would help expose a deeper problem that could no longer be ignored. Commissioner Chen sat in his office, staring at the wall of photos chronicling his 30 years of service. The city lights twinkled outside his window, but he barely noticed them. His computer screen showed dozens of new emails about tonight's incident, some from concerned citizens who'd witnessed the arrest, others from department heads demanding explanations. He picked up a framed photo from his desk, Alex's high school graduation. His son stood proud in his cap and gown, eyes bright with dreams of law school and making a difference in the world. Chen's wife had taken the picture, saying their boy would change the world someday. Neither of them had imagined change would come like this. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, setting down the photo. His assistant entered with a tablet showing social media posts about the incident. Videos were already going viral, his son standing calmly while being harassed, Officer Thompson's aggressive behavior, the moment Chen himself arrived at the scene. "Sir," his assistant said gently, "the mayor's office is calling. They want a statement." Chen nodded, rubbing his temples. He'd spent years implementing reforms, mandatory training sessions, community outreach programs. Yet here they were, his own son profiled and handcuffed for driving while black in an upscale neighborhood. His phone buzzed, a text from his wife. "Alex is home safe. He's shaken but okay. Don't stay too late." He smiled slightly. She always knew when he needed reminding to come home. Another knock, more urgent this time. The head of Internal Affairs entered, carrying a thick folder. "Sir, you need to see this. We pulled Thompson's record. There's a pattern." Chen opened the folder, his jaw tightening as he read. Complaints swept under the rug. Traffic stops targeting minorities. Write-ups that disappeared from his file. The system he'd fought to fix had protected Thompson for years. "How many others?" Chen asked quietly. "We're looking into similar patterns with other officers," she replied. "This could be bigger than we thought." Chen stood up, walking to his window. Below, protesters were already gathering outside the precinct, holding signs demanding justice and reform. News vans lined the street, their lights creating a carnival atmosphere in the darkness. His office phone rang, the police union representative, probably calling to defend Thompson. Chen let it go to voicemail. Tonight wasn't about politics or procedures. It was about a father realizing that despite his position, his son wasn't safe from the very system he commanded. He picked up his coat, decision made. "Call the mayor back," he told his assistant. "Tell him I'm holding a press conference tomorrow morning. Not as the commissioner, as a father who watched his son being profiled by one of our own. It's time we stopped pretending these are isolated incidents." His deputy commissioner appeared in the doorway, looking concerned. "Sir, the union won't like that approach." They'll say you're too emotionally involved. Good, Chen replied, straightening his tie. Because this is emotional. Every parent who's ever had to teach their child how to survive a traffic stop, every kid who's been followed around a store, every person who's been told they don't belong in their own neighborhood, they're emotional too. Maybe it's time we stopped pretending this isn't personal. He gathered his things, his mind already planning tomorrow's speech. Alex had texted earlier, asking if he should skip his morning law class to attend the press conference. Chen had told him no, go to class, learn the law, change the system from within. His son was already showing more grace than many would in his situation. As Chen walked through the precinct, officers stood straighter, some avoiding his eyes, others nodding in support. They all knew this night would change things. Sometimes it took a personal story to open people's eyes to a universal truth. His son's experience would become a catalyst for the change they desperately needed. The Internal Affairs conference room felt smaller than usual as Officer Thompson sat nervously adjusting his collar. The morning sun cast long shadows through the blinds, creating prison bar patterns across the table. His union representative sat beside him, shuffling through papers, while across the table, Commissioner Chen and the Internal Affairs team waited silently. The body camera footage played on the large screen behind them. Thompson watched himself approaching Alex's car, his own aggressive stance and tone now painfully obvious in playback. The audio captured every snide comment, every baseless accusation. With each passing minute, Thompson sank lower in his chair. "Stop the video," Commissioner Chen said quietly. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. "Officer Thompson, do you recognize your behavior in this footage?" Thompson cleared his throat. "Sir, I was just following standard procedure for suspicious." "Suspicious?" Chen interrupted, his voice level but intense. "My son was driving home from his law school class. He was wearing a suit. His car is registered in his name. His license was clean. Please explain to me what was suspicious." The union representative leaned forward. "Commissioner, if I may." "No, you may not," Chen cut in. "I want to hear from Officer Thompson. I want to know what made my son suspicious. Was it the color of his skin? His age? The fact that he was driving a nice car in a good neighborhood? Which of these things justified treating him like a criminal?" Thompson's face flushed red. "I didn't know he was your son, sir." "That's precisely the point." Chen opened a thick folder. "We've reviewed your record, Thompson. In the past 3 years, you've pulled over 238 minority drivers. Want to guess how many white drivers? 42. Can to explain that ratio?" The statistics hung in the air like smoke. Thompson shifted uncomfortably, looking to his union rep for help. But even the rep seemed to sense this was indefensible. "These pictures," Chen continued, spreading photos across the table, "show other incidents. A teacher handcuffed in front of his students because you thought he was trespassing at his own school. A doctor stopped while jogging in her own neighborhood. A business owner detained while opening his own store." Thompson's expression changed from defensive to worried as he realized the extent of the investigation. His past actions, previously brushed aside or excused, were now laid bare under the harsh light of scrutiny. "I've served this department for 12 years, Thompson protested weakly. "And in those 12 years, the Internal Affairs chief added, you've accumulated 27 civilian complaints, all from minority citizens. All mysteriously cleared without proper investigation, until now." Commissioner Chen stood up, straightening his jacket. "Officer Thompson, your badge and gun weren't just taken because you arrested my son. They were taken because you've shown a clear pattern of bias that this department won't tolerate anymore. My son's incident wasn't your mistake, it was your wake-up call." The morning light had shifted, now illuminating the wall of police department values, integrity, service, justice. Thompson stared at them, perhaps seeing them clearly for the first time. "The department will be conducting a full review of all your past arrests and traffic stops," Chen continued. "Any citizens who were wrongfully detained or harassed will be contacted and heard. This isn't just about one night or one traffic stop, it's about years of unchecked bias affecting countless lives." Thompson's union representative gathered his papers, knowing this was a battle they couldn't win. The evidence was too clear, the pattern too obvious. This wasn't just about protecting a police officer anymore, this was about addressing a systemic issue that could no longer be ignored. The investigation room walls were covered with photos, documents, and timelines. Detective Lee stood before the evidence board, adding another witness statement to the growing collection. 3 weeks had passed since Alex's arrest, and each day brought new revelations. Another victim came forward this morning. She told Commissioner Chen, who was reviewing case files at the conference table. A young architect. Thompson pulled him over 5 times in 2 months, always on his way to construction sites. Chen nodded, adding the report to his stack. The investigation had grown beyond Thompson, revealing a deeper pattern within certain precincts. Officers who'd worked with Thompson were being questioned and their records scrutinized. The department's data analyst entered with fresh statistics. "Sir, we've completed the initial review. In the past 3 years, minority drivers were 7 times more likely to be stopped in certain patrol zones. The numbers are impossible to explain away as coincidence." Local news played silently on the wall-mounted TV. The headline scrolled across the bottom. Police Department under investigation. Community demands change. Reform movement gains momentum. Alex's story had struck a chord, encouraging others to speak up about their experiences. Detective Lee's phone buzzed. Another tip from the community hotline they'd set up. People who'd stayed silent for years were finally finding their voice. Each call added another piece to the puzzle they were assembling. "The city council meeting is in an hour," Chen's assistant reminded him, poking her head in. "They're voting on the new oversight committee today." Chen gathered his presentation materials. The committee would be independent, with power to review police conduct and recommend changes. It wasn't just about catching bad officers anymore, it was about preventing these incidents before they happened. The wall of evidence told a story bigger than one officer or one department. It revealed how small biases could grow when left unchecked, how silence could enable injustice, and how one incident could expose years of hidden problems. "Latest survey results are in," the public relations director announced, entering with fresh data. 70% of residents support the reforms. People want change. Chen studied the photos on the wall, faces of citizens who'd been profiled, stopped, harassed. Each one had a story similar to his son's. But unlike Alex, they hadn't had a police commissioner father to ensure justice was served. The police union's fighting back, Detective Lee mentioned, checking her emails. "They're claiming we're undermining officer authority." "Show them these," Chen replied, holding up a stack of witness statements. "Real authority comes from community trust. We lost that trust somewhere along the way. Now we have to earn it back." The investigation had revealed uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and accountability. Some officers had resigned rather than face review. Others had come forward with their own stories of witnessing bias, but feeling powerless to stop it. Alex's law school had taken notice too. They were developing new courses on police reform and community relations. His classmates had organized legal clinics to help citizens file complaints and know their rights. "Sir," Detective Lee called out, "you should see this." She pulled up new body camera footage on her computer. "We found more incidents. Different officers, same pattern." Chen watched the screens, his determination growing. The investigation wasn't just about punishing past wrongs, it was about preventing future ones. Each revelation brought them closer to understanding how bias could infect a system meant to protect everyone equally. As he prepared to leave for the city council meeting, Chen looked at the evidence wall one last time. His son's case had started this, but it would end with something much bigger: real change, real accountability, and a chance to rebuild trust between police and the community they served. 6 months had passed since that fateful night. The police department's main conference room was packed with community leaders, officers, and media as Commissioner Chen took the podium. Behind him, a large screen displayed the department's new initiatives. "Today marks a new chapter," Chen began, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "In the past 6 months, we've made real changes. Not just promises, not just paperwork, but meaningful reform that's already showing results." The statistics on the screen told the story. Traffic stops had dropped by 40%, with no increase in crime rates. Civilian complaints were down by half. The new oversight committee, led by community members, had reviewed over 1,000 past cases and recommended changes to department policies. Alex sat in the front row, now a certified legal advisor for the Police Reform Committee. His law school experiences, combined with his personal story, had shaped him into a powerful voice for change. Next to him, his mother squeezed his hand proudly. Officer Thompson's case was just the beginning, Chen continued. Our investigation uncovered systemic issues that needed addressing. Today, I'm pleased to announce that every officer has completed our new training program. The screen showed images of police officers attending community meetings, participating in bias awareness workshops, and working with neighborhood youth programs. The changes weren't just on paper, they were visible on the streets. But numbers don't tell the whole story, Chen added, gesturing to the community members present. Real change happens in small moments. It happens when an officer stops to play basketball with local kids instead of viewing them with suspicion. It happens when our officers reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. The new recruits sitting in the back represented that change. A diverse group chosen not just for their physical capabilities, but for their understanding of community needs and cultural sensitivity. We've created a model that other departments are now following, Chen continued. Last month, 5 major cities adopted our reform program. This isn't just about fixing one department, it's about changing how we think about policing across the country. Alex stood up, walking to the podium as his father introduced him. The room fell silent. Many knew his story, but few had heard him speak about it publicly. What happened to me wasn't unique, Alex began. What's unique is what we chose to do about it. Instead of letting it become another statistic, we used it as a catalyst for change. He described the new legal clinic he'd helped establish, where law students provided free advice to community members about their rights. He talked about the youth mentorship program that paired officers with local students, building trust one relationship at a time. The changes weren't perfect, change never is, but they were real, measurable, and growing. Other departments were sending observers, learning from their experience, adapting their methods to their own communities. As the presentation ended, Chen looked around the room. He saw young officers talking with community leaders, reporters interviewing success stories, and most importantly, people from all walks of life working together for a better future. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. It wasn't even about one department. It was about showing that real change was possible when people cared enough to make it happen. As Alex had said in his speech, sometimes it takes a personal story to open eyes to a universal truth. The event ended with a community dinner, officers and citizens sharing meals and stories, building the kind of relationships that would prevent future incidents. It wasn't the end of the journey, but it was a powerful reminder of how far they'd come.